We're talking about this from a financing perspective too. So, what is renovation financing? Here at Cross Country Mortgage, we offer a number of loans that would give you the money to either purchase and renovate or refinance and renovate. So, today, while you're listening to the presentation, keep in mind if you're out there looking at houses today, or if you own a house that's in the right neighborhood and you want to stay there with your family, renovation financing can give you the money you need to get the renovations done you want now. Maybe you were told that you don't have enough equity for a home equity line of credit or a cash out refinance. Renovation financing is different. We're lending against the future value of your property. So we have a lot more flexibility to help you get the projects done that you want today. And these are all very affordable. They're 30-year fixed mortgages, low down payments if you're buying, and great LTVs if you're refinancing. So please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to tell you more about what your renovation financing options could be. Today, we're going to talk about empty spaces. So if you've been following us the last couple webinars, we've been talking about transitions. And today we're going to do the same. We're going to talk about transitioning that space. So, think about the types of empty spaces you may have in your home or that you may be seeing while you're out there shopping. So think about attics, basements, spare rooms, space above the garage. Maybe it's space that's not even there yet that you want to add to the house. And we're going to talk about some of those options as well. So think about that. And we just want to give you guys more ideas while you're out there looking at homes or while you're in your house and looking for ways to stay in your house. So, Kate, while we're thinking about empty spaces from a designer and a Feng Shui perspective, what should people keep in mind?
I think that overall, with anything that we're going to talk about today, the thought that I want you to keep in mind is like, how can our spaces serve our lives better and our goals better? We can really use our home to remind our brain of where we want to go and the most aligned way to get there. And it's just by being a little bit more intentional about how we're living and how we're setting up our spaces. And so I think that, even something that you could do today in your own home, just to be like, oh, I've never looked at my home in this way, is, gain some awareness of your space. Like when you're sitting in your living room tonight, think about like, oh, you know what? How does this space make me feel? And then if it doesn't make you feel the way you want it to, okay, well, if it feels like this, how can I take it to feeling like this, the way I want it to feel? And then take inventory of the things that you have in your space, right? Does this artwork make me feel good or bad? Does this rug make me feel good or bad? And it might sound silly, but it's really important because we don't put that much intention and stock behind what we're surrounding ourselves with, but it's super important. And so by doing those couple exercises within your space, then you can start to remove what isn't serving you, what isn't inspiring you, and what isn't like overall making your life better.
I love that. I know I've redone a couple of rooms in our house just on some of the tips that you've given on that and thought like, why don't I have any pictures of my kids over here? Because it is all about making the space make you feel good, right?
Mhm.
So let's take a look at the first empty space that we were talking about and what could go in it and creating a home office. And so we've talked about home offices before. They've definitely been in demand the last couple of years. Everybody had a work from home experience at some point and needed a space in their house. And then some companies moved to work from home more permanently or on more days a week. So I know that a lot of you out there, either in your house, have put a home office together, maybe a little haphazardly. And some folks out there who are looking at houses, you're looking for a house that has that space that can be the home office. So, from a renovation perspective, if we're looking at the bigger scale, this is something that you could definitely use finished space in your house to make. What came to mind at first for me was an attic. because a lot of the attics, especially in our older homes, are not finished. And that's going to give you a ton of space to move around in, to have storage. You'll have windows, you'll have light. So finishing an attic space is going to give you about a 70% return on investment. It's also another great space to finish, especially with renovation financing, because now you're adding square footage to your house. And that square footage was already there. So you're not having to spend as much as you would on an addition, but you're getting the functional square footage. And someday, if you do go to sell, just because you're using it as an office now, someone else could use it as a bedroom or a master suite area, especially if you build a closet into that space. So it's a great space to consider for something like an office. And maybe you want to, wire the electric a certain way. I know a lot of people like to have their desks in the middle of the room. Maybe you want to have the electric brought out to the middle of the room, or have a high-speed internet cable installed. And these are all things you can do with a renovation loan. Built-ins too. I think we see a lot of built-ins when it comes to having a home office. But these are all the things that all of us think about all the time, right? Like, what are the functional utility things that we need? And so, Kate, I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. What are some things that people could consider for self-care, especially in an office space where, if you are working from home, you're sitting there like 8 hours a day? So what should people think about?
So I think the first thing is that it's a comfortable space. Like the chair that you sit in should be comfortable, right? And it should kind of like serve the way you like to work. For example, I don't have the arms on the side of my chairs and it has like a big bucket seat more. Like that's kind of what it reminds me of, because I like to sit like with my legs up, with my legs down, like I'm kind of moving around a lot. And then I've also been seeing people that are doing, have you seen those walking pads
I've
that
got
you
one of
can
those.
put? Do you use it
Yeah,
while you're on
I
your
do.
computer?
I do.
Do
I
you
use it
love
for
it?
like an
Because
hour a day.
I've
Hmm.
been like really intrigued by this and I'm like, oh, this might be really, I've been seeing this a lot. So like that's something else. But having like a comfortable seat, I think is so it almost sounds like, well, duh, of course I want to be comfortable, but how many people out there could raise your hand and say, I hate my desk chair or I'm not
Yeah.
comfortable sitting at my desk, right? Like, yeah, it seems obvious, but it's something that we kind of just will get used to. So having a
Hmm.
comfortable seat and like spending, a little money on something that's more comfortable is really important. And then I think too, like figuring out how do you like to work? Like, will you be more productive if you have a walking pad, because you're all over the place and it helps you to be doing something while you're doing something like, do you take a lot of breaks? So just kind of figuring out like the way you like to work, just like the way you have to have your stuff organized. I actually learned of this concept when I was going through like my feng shui schooling. And one of my teachers was like, are you like a pile person or a folder person? And I'm like, what do you mean a pile person? And they're like, well, you kind of like to have piles of your projects set out and then you can go through them, or you like them all condensed and like folder. And I was like, oh my god, I'm a pile person. I have like piles of stuff, and when I put something in like a sorting tray or something like that, it never leaves there. Like it goes in there to die, right? So figuring out kind of like your style of how you work, when you are most productive, especially if you work at home, like when are you most productive sitting down in your space? So those are things to just consider when it comes to your space. From a feng shui perspective, making sure that you are in command position in the room is going to take away a lot of subconscious distraction and anxiety. And command position just means that you are seated at your desk to where you can see out of the door. So it's like you always know what's coming. And if you are not able, if your desk has to be against the wall and your desk and your back has to face the door, you could always hang like a cool mirror or something like that up in front of you so that you're always able to see behind you. So if you have a hard time focusing and your back is against the door, try it. You might think like, okay, that sounds silly, but just try it and see if it helps your productivity. I've seen it help countless people, especially, myself. So, and I also think it's really important that this is a space that makes you feel inspired in some way. So that might look like decorating it, for your taste on a larger scale, like, so it really inspires you. It might look like, maybe you don't have a vision board, but that's something that you think would benefit you. So creating something like that and hanging it above your desk or having it somewhere in the room with you. Even if you do face the door and you feel kind of like sluggish in your office space, this is always a great space to add a mirror as well, just anywhere in the room, because mirrors reflect. And so we believe that they reflect energy. So they're going to kind of, get some more activity going into your space.
I love that. I do feel like with the pandemic, because I see appraisals all the time for people who are doing the renovation loans. And so, you see a picture of every room, and there is almost always some kind of home office space, but so many of us were kind of thrust into this. Like my husband and
Mhm.
I have been working from home for almost 10 years. So we were all set, we were ready to go. But most people were just all of a sudden working from home and having to kind of make that space. And now that it is becoming more of a permanence, I feel like now's the time to really think about those things and make the space work the best for you that it can.
Mhm.
So home office is one we talk about a lot. Another space that we talk about a lot too is guest room. And so, I wanted to talk about with renovation, one of the huge trends right now on the West Coast, and it's coming over to the Southeast right now, are building an accessory dwelling unit. Um, they're great. You can now build in most areas a detached dwelling unit that's like a small guest house. And people use them primarily for family, friends to either move in, be able to visit, maybe they rent it part of the time. It's a great way to add space to your house that's going to add value. It's functional because you can use it as a guest space, and you can also use it as a rental when you don't have guests up. So it can bring money back to your property. Right now, an ADU is bringing somewhere between 70 to 80% return on investment, depending on where you are. As more and more people build accessory dwelling units in your area, it could add more value down the line. That would be an example of a big scale renovation that you could do. And of course, whether you're adding a dwelling, an addition, or just taking a room that you already have in the house, once that space is there and defined, now you've got to decide how to decorate it and what to do in it. So, Kate, I'd love to hear your advice on what people should keep in mind when they are putting together a guest space.
Yeah. So, one, I think that the first thing to be recognized is like, just because you may have just a solely dedicated guest room does not mean that you should only be in it if guests are there. If we think about rooms in our home that we like never spend any time in, well, those rooms typically kind of become stagnant, right? Like there's nothing going on in them. And so I think that even if you do have the space to have a solely dedicated guest room, is there something that you can add to the space, do in the space, practice in the space, so that regularly there's like some life and some kind of action going on, in that room, which is something we can kind of talk about in a minute. But I do think that that's really important. Um, with a guest room, I just always, when I'm having guests over, if I have this solely dedicated guest room, I want my guests to just feel like so welcomed and special. Put nice sheets and a duvet and a cover and everything on the bed. Make sure that you have balance in the room. The bed's not just shoved up in some corner when like, oh, here's a sheet and a blanket, enjoy. you know Add some throw pillows. Like, you can have fun in this space. Maybe this is a space where you want to experiment with a paint color, or maybe even wallpaper or something like that, that you can kind of give it character, since it isn't a room that's maybe seen as often. So like adding some small touches in the design that are very, that kind of have some life to them, I think helps too with that room not becoming stagnant. Um, a few things that I just kind of like in a bedroom, in general, a rug is always really great to have under a bed just because it helps ground into that space. And we want to feel really safe and grounded when we're sleeping. Um, and, when you do have guests over, and I know I've said this before, giving your guests like a little amenity basket or something like that, giving them a few extra towels, having some bottles of water, some snacks, something like that, just so that, when they are in your space, they can really feel really comfortable, really at home, and don't need to feel like, they're bothering you for something. So if you are able to do that, I always think that's a nice touch as well.
I love it. Yeah. And I do feel like, like we were talking about the other day, people are starting to travel again. They're starting to visit family and friends again. And so maybe that guest room or that spare room was turned into the home office. And now you want to do the attic because it's a more permanent space and you want to make this space back for guests again. I think that that's
Mhm.
something that people are looking for, is that spare space. Now, next up, we were going to talk about multi-purpose spaces. And when I think about a multi-purpose room and renovation and kind of the most bang for your buck, I always think about the basement. It's a great space to finish. The attic is great, I think, for an office because you do have the windows and you've got some light. And maybe even though it's big, so you don't feel claustrophobic, your headspace, but depending on how your roof goes, might be a little bit limited. Whereas in the basement, you often have full head space across the whole space. Um, and that again is square footage that you don't have to add to the house. It's already there. So bang for your buck. This is going to be a great way to add the most square footage possible. These again give about 70% return on investment for the renovation. And especially if you have like a walkout, this is again just like a really great way to gain a lot of space quickly that you could use in a number of ways. Super easy to put up walls down there too to cordon off space if you need to. But again, once you've got the space, you've got to design it and decide what goes in there. So, Kate, when you think about multi-purpose from a design or a feng shui perspective, what are you thinking about there?
So I think this is a good kind of what I alluded to when talking about the guest room, right? Like we don't necessarily want a space that's just blocked off and you only use it for this, right? It gets used 3 times a year and that's it. We want to be utilizing our space. And so I think that a multi-purpose room is so great for that, right? And
Mhm.
so I think there are a couple things. One is even if it's a multi-purpose space, let's just say, for example, you have like an office and a guest room and they're all in one room, right? Even if the room isn't overly large, I think it's important um, to give intention to detail to both spaces individually. So that might look like putting up a room divider, in front of the desk, and maybe you find like a cool canopy or something for the bed and it has its own rug. Even if those areas are very near each other, I think that when they're being used for separate things, it's important that when you're in that space for that thing, you feel grounded in that space and you're not distracted by the other things that you can do. Um, and so I think layering and being very intentional about how you're setting up the space and providing, a moment for kind of grounding in each area is really going to help you enjoy that space, right? And want to use it for multi-purpose. Um, and I think this is a great place too. It doesn't even have to be this full area. Like maybe you want to get into a meditation routine and you just need a little corner with your little, meditation pillow or your little chair or whatever it is, that you can have a basket with your blanket and your journal there. So it makes that new routine, that new habit really easy for you, right? And you can just have it nice, tucked away, cute in the corner of a room. So, same thing if you love to read and you don't read often anymore. So you set up that space within a room in your home that can be like your little haven to just curl up and read in now that, it's getting colder and we're spending more time indoors, or maybe you want to craft more. So your office space also becomes your craft room. So I think it's just really important that we evaluate all of these spaces and say, what am I actually going to use it for? What things do I want to start doing in my life that this room could, support me in doing?
That's one of the things I love about renovation. It lets you take this blank canvas space, like a basement, right? That might seem a little dank and, you might not think of it as space that you can use, and you can turn it into something that suits your own life, your family, and builds equity and wealth for yourself at the same time. So it's like it's a win all around.
Hmm.
And if you're doing a basement space, I know we talked about putting up walls, but you can also build in waterproofing, French drain, anything you need to do to make that basement usable space, you could also build into a renovation loan. So, and that's not only making the space usable for you, that's also going to add to the health of your home, right? It's going to help keep your foundation in good shape and now make that space usable for you. So,
Hmm.
multi-purpose space, I think the basement is a great fit for that. We have one other category we wanted to talk about, and this is one that I feel like lots of people don't think about, and this is reallocating spaces. And so this could mean something big or it could mean something little. But the things I thought of off the bat were, let's say your kids have moved out of the house. Maybe they had a bathroom that they shared or that they had, and now you want to make that part of a master suite, or you want to steal part of it to make a laundry room on the second floor because you don't need it. A full bathroom for those two kids. They've moved out. You just want a powder room. So think about too, you can always move the layout of your home. Those walls are there, but they don't have to stay there. You can go as big as having a structural engineer come in and helping you decide or figure out how to move the walls to better serve your needs. Or you could be in a position where you're not moving a structural wall, you're just putting up a new wall or borrowing space from a room that's there or from a closet and changing it to something else. Um, what do you think about Kate for reallocating spaces from a design or a feng shui perspective?
Well, I think just like I feel like I've said this so many times, but I really feel like it's like sitting down and thinking about how do I want my space to accommodate my life, right? Like
Mhm.
not forcing yourself to work around the space, but making the space work around you. And I think that's such a powerful signal to kind of send to your brain, right? Because you're saying, no, I want this set up to serve me. And I also think that like when you do that within your space, you're also signaling to like your own brain that like I'm going to start showing up like this, in life as well. And so that's why I think like spending some intentional time and actually thinking about how to allocate the spaces in your home to like really serve your needs is what's so important. And it's so easy to be like, well, of course we should, finish the basement and do this and do that, but like why are you doing it? What's that end result? What do you want to be able to do in there? And so often we don't think about that until after it's done. And then we say, oh, I wish I would have done this and I would have done this differently and yada, yada, because we're not thinking about that beforehand. So, you know, I'm with you. There's so many things you could do. You could make your master, you could create the master suite or make it bigger, or give yourself that closet you've always wanted. But again, like, is the bigger closet like what you need right now? Or is it a more of like a retreat spa like bathroom because you're stressed out because you've been building a company and you need a place that feels like a haven to you? So I think that's where I'm coming from a lot in our talk today, but I do think it's really important.
And I love that. I love that part of your design, Kate, because you are always looking to what is this space going to be used for? And at the end of the day, it is your house. You don't have to live with it exactly the way you bought it. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you bought it, 10 years ago and it's in the right neighborhood and you're just looking to change the functionality, or you're out there shopping now. And I know there's limited inventory and maybe you can't find exactly what you want. I know, it's great that there are so many shows about renovation now, but I feel like all of those shows make it seem like people have 100,000 sitting in their bank account waiting to do these renovations, right? And people
Yeah.
don't. A lot of people use renovation financing to get done what they need to do today because they're able to borrow against that future value. And I love what you said, Kate, too, about, you're finishing off this space to make new space for things you want to bring into your life, whether that is meditation or a gym space or a place for your kids to hang out. It's really about making that space. And so I think that was our last topic of today to talk about transitioning rooms. I saw a few questions come up. Again, I'm Victoria Dowling. I'm the VP of Renovation Lending here at Cross Country Mortgage. We have Kate Troyer with us. We'd love to answer questions that you guys have.
Alrighty, thank you so much, ladies. Yeah, we do have a couple here. The first is talking about transformations in an attic space. I want to turn my attic space into an office space / storage area, but I have very angled ceilings and feel like it would be too cramped. Do either of you have any solutions as to how to accomplish this? I can fit a desk and I can walk behind, but I can't really have large or tall bookshelves or storage areas.
Mm. Kate, any ideas there? From the big reno perspective, you could always add a dormer. That's going to be the
Yeah,
expensive option,
that's what
right?
I was like, well, that might be your like perfect option, right? Is to add the dormers and make some more room. Um, so I would say like I would make sure that like I would want to know what you consider the usable space in there. Is it like you're shuffling over to the desk to sit down because that's the only way you can like fully stand up in it? Because if that's the case, I feel like you're not going to feel great in that space in general unless you were to do maybe something more dramatic on a renovation side. Um, if that's not the case and there really is room for you to kind of move around, you're just limited on the type of way that you can organize. I don't know. I think you just might have to get creative, like maybe even, like the oh, just like the square boxes that like the cube organizers, right? Those you can get those that are much shorter and maybe like that's the way you have to organize that space. I think it just depends on what exactly those needs are and what are you trying to store up there would be my question too, is like maybe you go through all your stuff and everything that you're storing is really important to you and you use it at some point throughout the year for something. But if not, I would say also evaluating, what needs to be stored and, if it does need to be stored, why are you storing it would be important as well.
And I've seen too in some of the attic renovations where, like, let's say your roof is sloping and you have this space down here, like you were saying, Kate, right? That's a shorter space. I've seen some people build in drawers or build in shelves down there
Yeah.
or build with a door so that you can put the storage under there. Or if your attic is really pitched like this, maybe building a wall down the middle and having storage in the back. And then you've got a wall with a lot of headroom where you could put your desk.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it would probably all depend on where your windows are and how that space is gonna fit together.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. Next question is tips for making an office serve as a multi-purpose room as well.
Okay, I know you have some tips for that.
Well, God, I kind of wish this was slightly more specific. Again, I think how I mentioned, like, if it's going to be a multi-purpose space, making sure that like your office space feels like your office space. And then like my office is a perfect example. I share it with, our guest room. And I think I've done a nice job of like I hung like this huge piece of artwork. Actually, it's leaning on my desk in front of me to like kind of ground this in the space more. Um, and made sure that I have a nightstand for the bed, and like it just kind of, they feel like separate spaces when you're in them. Um, and so that's something that I think is important. And also making like whatever you're using that multi-purpose space for, like if it's an office and something else, like making sure that what you need to use in that space is like easily accessible, right? So design is amazing, but not when it doesn't like make it logical and accessible for you to do what you need to do in that space. That's why I love oversized baskets. They're like my lifesaver, because in any given space, I can always have a large basket with like the things I need, right? And so that might be a way, like, for example, if you had like a meditation space in your office, that, you know, you had like a basket in your corner or wherever with all of the things that like give you a good meditation, right? Or like move you into more of that relaxed vibration. So I think just like setting those spaces up to where you have everything you need and it's easily accessible, and aesthetically pleasing, like you're not like, oh my God, it feels like a mess in here. You're able to kind of contain your things. And that's why large baskets are amazing. Yeah, those would be like kind of my tips without knowing something, you know, more specific, I guess.
And I think from the bigger scale renovation aspect, the one that we always talk about is the Murphy bed. Like
Mm,
if you don't need that guest space that
yep.
often, building in a Murphy bed is great because now you can push it up on the wall and really have that space for your day-to-day office.
Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, the last question actually, I believe, is just for you, Kate. Because of this series, I've been researching Feng Shui more, and I read that an empty room or house represents dark, negative energy. I just bought a condo and I don't have enough furniture to fill all of the rooms. Is there something I can do to clear out that negative energy on a budget?
So, okay, so I love this question. You just bought the home, so I don't think that there is this negative, stagnant energy in the room because you just don't have enough furniture yet, right? To me, that's more referring to like you have a home, you have a room that sits empty and neglected for a long period of time, which means that the energy can become very stagnant. Um, and so that's where I think it's important to like, maybe this is a room, even before you have furniture, you can just do something in, right? Whether it's crafts or reading or just something, or just like going into the room and being like, hey, room, what's up? You know, like giving it some attention. Um, but you can also do things like if you want to clear some energy and things like that, you could always get some sage or spray or whatever. And you don't have to do anything like that. It's more about the intention, like going into that space. And like if you feel like it's got some stagnant energy, I think this would be great to do for your entire home if you just moved in, is even if you don't use any tools like sage or anything like that, you don't have to use those things. Those are tools to like make us feel better about what we're doing. What's most important is like you use intention. So you could even just sit at your, you know, somewhere in your home and just with the intention of like, hey, I want to clear out any old energy in here. You know, I want to release any stagnant energy. This is my space now. And I want to bring in the energy of, you know, X, Y, and Z, because that's the type of space that I want to live in. So it's really about setting that intention. I don't think that you have this like horrible energy sucking space just because, you know, you have an empty room. And if that's something that you're, you know, interested in learning more about, I do have an online community. It's completely free to join and make your profile on there, where we talk about stuff like this. And I do little courses every week. And so if you're interested in diving a little bit deeper into feng shui, that might be like a really awesome resource for you. So you can find it by going to my website and just hitting like join the community.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, ladies. That looks like that was the last of our questions today.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Our contact info is up here as always. We'd love to hear from you, whether you have a renovation or a design or a Feng Shui question, or you want to learn more about renovation financing. So we hope to see you guys next time on our call, and have a great day.